Hello and welcome to another episode of Sonic Touch, the show dedicated to making music on touch devices. I'm Nick Batt, editor of SonicState.com with a heavy cold.
And I'm Gaz Williams, trying not to have a heavy cold.
Yes, probably for the best. Right, first thing we want to get out of the way is we're going to be saying the word Moog a lot, okay? And we say it Moog, and it's just a force of habit. I know it should be pronounced Moog. I do occasionally try and remember, but just to make it easy for us to sort of do this in a live kind of scenario, we're going to just say Moog. And every time we say it, just imagine we're saying Moog, and then we can say no more about it. So what are we looking at today then, Gaz?
Well, the reason why we're talking about that is because we're going to be looking at the Arturia iMini, which has recently just been released.
So this is the emulation of the classic 70s monosynth, right?
Monosynth, the Mini Moog, yes, indeed. Now that, for those of you who don't know, is like was the first real kind of monosynth that the bands were using on stage, and it's just so influential. It's just such an incredibly important instrument in the history of music, really.
Yes, a 1970s, the first kind of really compact performance synthesizer, really.
Absolutely, yeah. Used on so many famous records, from sort of like prog rock stuff like Yes and Emerson, Lake and Palmer, through to things like Gimme 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 by ABBA, and the bass line on Michael Jackson Thriller.
Oh, it's everywhere. And also, you know, Trevor Horn, how he started out in 808 and a Mini Moog. And actually he was the first person to kind of get it kind of gating and sync pulsing on pop records.
Gary Newman, you know, it's everywhere, isn't it? It's such an important instrument. So now why I think this is a good release is because there's such a lot of history, as we say, about this synthesizer, but actually the software has got quite a lot of history as well, because it's made by Arturia, who are famous for making their virtual instruments.
Yeah, and of course the iBrute,
the Mini Brute,
yes,
which is hardware synth as well.
And the Origin, yeah. Both reviewed on Sonic State here if you just do a search.
Yeah, so this is a port then of the Mini Moog V, which is quite a long-running virtual instrument that Arturia have been marketing for a while, and it's been ported across in conjunction with Retronyms.
Retronyms do the Tabletop, which is kind of like an inter-application.
That's right.
Bit of communication or what have you.
We'll more about that in a moment.
Yep,
okay.
Yep. So should we take a look?
Let's have a look. Yeah. Okay. So let's open it up. The iMini. So there's a nice little picture of it. Okay. So it's laid out virtually identically to the original. The primary difference really is that we've got some effects controls on the right here.
Yeah, they've had to compress it up a little bit to kind of
squished it in a little bit, but it's pretty close to the real thing. And one of the things that's quite striking to me really is that they really have tried to make it your first appearance, that your first approach to it is very much like approaching the real synthesizer. Now the real synthesizer is a monophonic synthesizer, and this little tiny switch down here enables us to toggle it into polyphonic mode should we need that. But it's quite nice that that your first kind of approach.
Yeah, you get to see it. Actually, mono mode. I should say this does actually run on iOS 5.1 up and on an iPad Classic. But only really in mono mode. You start putting it in poly and it just goes, nah, wait, mate.
Right. Okay, so architecturally, it's a 3 oscillator synthesizer with a
2 envelopes and a filter.
Envelopes,
yeah. It's the classic Mini layout, basically.
Yep, absolutely.
I mean, it sounds quite fulsome, actually, doesn't it?
I mean, it's not good. It does sound pretty good. Now, tucked underway here, I can touch this little thing and open this little panel, which gives us some controls where we can, you know, this thing we see quite regularly now, where we can.
So we can go into iPad keyboard mode.
Yeah, exactly. And a few little controls as well, which let us kind of do a few things which isn't original. But we can kind of, again, just tuck that away to return back to this view. Just as a quick tour around things, we're in the main mode now. Now, the original synthesizer doesn't have effects.
No.
But there is an effects mode here where we've got a chorus and a delay.
Nice. I like the way they've gone for the kind of like a 3C panel look there. Very nice.
Yeah. And then this mode in the middle here, which is called Perform, which gives us quite a full-featured arpeggiator and a couple of chaos pad type things. Now, these chaos pads are quite nice in that, they're initially mapped to things like cut off and resonance.
Let me guess.
Yeah. But if we hit the little symbol here, we can get a little view of.
Oh, that's a nice way of doing it.
Yeah, and then we can just select which of the controls we want to.
Oh, okay, so you scroll through them, but it gives you, it's like a visual representation.
A visual representation,
nice.
yeah. So it's kind of quite nice. And then that just, would give us different ways of interacting with the sound. And then that's more or less it. But we can hit a little connect button at the top here, and now this gives us, a way to
add plugs in and out of the tabletop system.
Now, we'll come back to that in a minute.
MIDI
and tempo and whist as well, which is...
right. That's the Korg system where you can have start and stop.
Start and stop, yeah. So
it's syncing arpeggiators and stuff like that, right?
So say with your iPad, you could be running the iMS20, I could be running the iMini, and we could link together and the clocks would be synchronized. But here's a nice thing. If I touch MIDI, I can go into MIDI Learn, and then for whichever window we're on, we can see there's like a little blue glow around all the controls.
So we can just learn whatever.
Yes. So I mean, like come back to the let's go to the main. Same thing again. MIDI Learn. We can see.
Right. So everything is
touch
automated.
the control. Give your knob a little turn on your MIDI keyboard that you've got plugged in, and then MIDI mappable. Yeah.
So I think we should have a listen to a few sounds, really, if that's all right.
Okay. So classic MIDI.
It's got the note priority stuff going on there as well.
But it's got it. The original Mini was only
low note, wasn't it?
Yeah.
No, so this just does last by the looks of these.
Yes.
Which is kind of cool, but I mean, really, you're going to want to play that in, from a keyboard, MIDI connected keyboard.
Ideally,
I imagine, to get the most of it. Yeah.
Now, when it comes to sounds, here is one of the very strong points about this particular instrument. I hit load, and we can see here we've got many patches, and these are by some quite renowned people. Here's Jeff Downs, who was
a very well-known Mini Moog user.
KP Rausch, Klaus Schultz. So these are what I think is interesting. We were talking about this in a historical perspective. A lot of these people would have
they're original users and pioneers using that synthesizer.
Exactly, and so with this being ostensibly identical in terms of functionality to the original, a lot of these patches will have been, derived from their original uses. So I think that's quite interesting. And okay, so Jeff Downs, for instance, let's have a look at leads. So we've got a bunch of leads. And one thing I quite like is that when you change presets, the key doesn't change.
I noticed that.
So the scale is set to whatever you set it to.
That's handy, yeah. Very prog.
Yes.
Funky worm.
Okay.
It's interesting, there's a lot of delays on those, but actually, from what I've heard so far, even coming out of the headphones, it sounds quite beefy. And perhaps, actually, we do have a Model D here, which we're going to do a bit of a comparison as well. But let's listen to a few more sounds here first, eh?
The reason we're going to do that is because this is a very close emulation, so we thought it would be nice to actually see just how close these sounds actually are to the original.
We'll get some basses on the go, so we just hear just how...
Oh yeah. Nice.
Yeah, that's beefy, isn't it?
Yeah.
Also, it's worth pointing out that we did actually hook this up using the I/O dock and play it in, using some other D2As.
Yes.
Just to see where there was a difference in sound. And even though it's quite close with the headphones, it does sound, better coming out of a sort of dedicated I/O, right?
Yeah, absolutely. I've made a little recording on SoundCloud where I've done a comparison between the headphone output and a audio interface, so you can check that out if you want to see. Because if you do use it with either the camera connection kit plugged into an audio interface or whatever, you get this extra thickness of sound.
Just that extra sort of low octave. I mean, it does sound a little bit, there might be some sort of extra DSP on the EQ on it, but it sort of feels acceptable. It does sound, but details will be in the show notes, and I might get a lower third going here with where that is actually as well. So.
Okay. Yes. So as I say, plenty of patches, plenty of sounds, and a very, very nice, easy to use synthesizer. So, we were talking earlier about retronyms and tabletop. And so you might be thinking, okay, great. How could we integrate this with other pieces of software? Well, it does act as a plugin into Tabletop.
Right, so we can use it as a module. And it doesn't work with Audio Bus.
Now, that's a very interesting point, because we've seen this now. This is the second major release that's come out following the Akai IMPC that doesn't have Audio Bus, but is kind of integrated within the Tabletop kind of world.
I think they call that, in this time of papalness, they call that a schism, don't
There's
they?
a schism going on. So are things going to be Tabletop, or are they going to be Audio Bus?
Good question.
So let's have a look. So we're going to open up Tabletop, and we'll see that within Tabletop, we can add things to Tabletop, like it's a modular system. You know, we can touch here.
Oh, right, okay.
Yeah, and I can just drag it onto the table.
And then you've got the MIDI. And does that give you access to the patches and the panels, or?
Yeah, it's actually exactly the same.
Yeah, so just
exactly the same. It's just sort of squashed a little bit down, but it's exactly the same. An advantage of it being within Tabletop is that we can, we can hit sequence, for instance, and we've got a pretty good
it's like a grid editor. Yeah.
Editor, but also there's a lot more things we can, for instance, if we zoom out, we could add extra effects into things. We can
like patch them in modular.
Patch them in. We can kind of route the outputs. A little bit like the Reason kind of idea, where you can kind of patch things into things. So, you know,
And how quickly, I mean, this is on an iPad 2, right? You're running out of a CPU on it very quickly when you're
reasonably,
running this polyphony.
reasonably. Like, for instance, if I brought in two, we can have a look at this, Mr. O. We can see the CPU now with nothing playing. It's starting.
Nothing even playing.
Nothing even playing.
Help!
So if we just quickly went into record and just played a few little things in. Okay, let's go to the other one. CPU.
Juicy.
Okay, so
yeah, that's. I mean, you know, the thing about it is obviously there's this equation, isn't there? There's like, I want it to sound good, but I want it to have, you know, less CPU. You know, you can't have no CPU and sounding great. You've got to have a kind of balance between the two, right?
Exactly. So, you know, we're starting to see, like we mentioned in the last episode, that the iPad 2 is starting to kind of creak. Yeah. So if you're on an iPad 4, I would say, then you're going to really start to feel quite comfortable with this, you know. But I think iPad 2, iPad 3, it's very usable. You can do plenty with it, but you are going to be limited to a degree.
So we thought it'd be kind of fun, as we have actually got a Model D in the studio at the moment, to sort of do a quick comparison and see how they matched up. First of all, I want to say thank you very much to Dan Wilson of Hideaway Studios. They make some really good stuff with which are kind of sample instruments. You should see a link in the show notes and a link down here for lending me his, because it's a funny story. Basically, I had a Mini Moog sort of lined up to borrow, and I sort of said, oh, can I pick it up tonight? And the chap I was borrowing it off said, no, I'm rehearsing. And I said, okay, well, do you know anyone else who's got one? He said, no, because I'm actually rehearsing for a Mini Moog orchestra piece, which means everybody I know with a Mini Moog in the southwest of England is using theirs. So Dan was the only person we could find. He very, very kindly lent us his Model D, and I know it's very precious to him.
So Nick is over at the Mini Moog, and I'm going to be playing on the iPad iMini. So what we've done is we've tried to match the panel controls, so we've got essentially the same sound. I'm going to play a C on my Mini, on mine. Oh, obviously the tuning's always going to be a little bit strange.
Yeah, this is a real Mini Moog.
So I'm playing a C on the iMini.
Whoa! It's not very stable, this one, is it?
Yeah, that was a big problem with the original, was its tuning stability. Okay, so now
So if I come back over quickly, obviously there are things like, obviously with the Mini, the iMini, there are things like the waveform sync are going to be fairly constant. As you heard there on the Model D, it's a bit drifty and it's not the most stable thing. But this is quite an early one, so later models were probably more stable. So, so we're going to try a couple more things. We're going to try some filter sweeps.
Yeah, so we're going to put a little bit of the filter emphasis, which is essentially resonance, and put like a long sustaining note, and then we'll just play with the cutoff frequency just to see how the filters sound comparatively. So I've switched to a sawtooth wave now, and I'm just going to do a sweep with the cutoff. Okay.
So any emphasis on that?
Yeah, I've got about 5 on the emphasis.
Okay, over to me.
Over.
So I'm going to the Mini Moog now. I'll just take the emphasis up to about halfway, you said, was it?
Yeah, about halfway.
And again, we've got a triangle wave. I'll just create a long and a C up here. So.
So it sounds kind of in the same ballpark. I think
what I'm noticing is the very slight microscopic changes in, if we try and copy the same settings here, but they're actually, ever so slightly out. So when you move it a tiny bit, it sort of gets closer to the sound. So the panel mapping isn't absolutely spot on. I mean, it wouldn't be. This is like 40-year-old electronics we're talking about here.
And famously, every Model D Mini Moog does sound a little bit different. Whereas every instance of iMini, it's going to be exactly the same.
So obviously that was quite a kind of cold, basic kind of example. Maybe what we should do is just try and get an arpeggiator going on there and then blend the two. So I guess what we're trying to find out is, will it blend?
Will it blend?
Let's see.
Okay, so if I enable the arpeggiator, put it on here, and then I'll play an arpeggiator. Okay.
And I'll come in with a bit of Moog. So that definitely had a kind of, the characters were quite similar, weren't they? It did blend very well, I would say.
Yeah. The Moog definitely has more weight to it than the iPad.
And it's more unpredictable. I mean, it was all out of tune and all over the place.
Trying to get it into tune. However, we did mention earlier though that if you do plug it through an audio interface, you will get a much thicker sound, which will actually get a little closer to the original one.
Yeah, and we tried that with the Elisa's I/O dock, obviously, which will work anything up to the iPad 3, but no more because we've got the Lightning connector, which was not best say that. But you plugged it into you've got another setup that you use as well.
I've plugged it into two things. I've plugged it into the M Audio Venom, which is a keyboard, and that worked reasonably well, although it was a bit intermittent. But I also used it with my TC Electronics Voice Live Touch. And that just sounds amazing.
So you got a good.
Yeah, it sounded really good. So that's got good converters.
So not a bad job, actually. That sounds like. I think Arturia have kind of, it's easy to think, there's no way it's going to be any good. But if you consider maybe using this as a sound module, standalone,
yes,
and just kind of worked on it that way, it's actually not a bad system, right?
No, it's excellent. And I mean, as I say, it comes with a fantastic, I would say a plethora of quality presets to get you going, but also it's The Mini Moog has always been a great synth to kind of learn on.
Yeah, presets on a Mini Moog just seem wrong somehow. You know?
Yeah.
You just got to get on there. But there's something to be said. Obviously, standing in front of the real thing, it's a completely different experience, obviously, than standing in front of it. Because you can see much more easily. You've got a larger scale. You know what's what. You can see what the actual kind of connections are. Not connections, but where the knobs are. It's quicker. It's more intuitive to use, obviously.
Although I was thinking a nice partner for the iMini would be the Studio Logic Sledge, because that's laid out very similar to the Mini Moog, isn't it? So you could have your iPad
maybe
on
just map it out in the same way.
Yeah, could be cool.
So the iMini is from Arturia. It's available now in the App Store, priced at
£6.99, which I think is $9.99.
So that's all for this episode. Thank you very much for watching. As ever, we welcome your comments. Please leave them below.
Yeah, and you know what? I think before we go, I think we should do one of our
legendary jams.
I think so.
Okay, let's see whether we can put something together. In fact, and Gaz, you're going to play some more polyphonic stuff on this, right?
Yeah, I'm going to flip on the poly mode now, so I can play chords, and I'll do more of like a kind of pad type thing, and you can do some
other stuff
on the Mini Moog.
On the real Mini Moog. Once again, thanks very much to Dan for the loan of the Mini Moog. Do check out their sound libraries, Hideaway Studios, and the Hollow Sun stuff. He works with them. So thanks again. So let's go.